My top 10 favorite horror films. Now, I've been a horror fan ever since I was a kid, staying up all night at Halloween time watching the horror movie marathons on TV. I had so much fun getting scared. Here are my personal favorite horror films, and I threw in my favorite scene from each film. If you've never seen some of the films on the list, then check them out for Halloween. Number 10, The Tingler. The Tingler is a fun, campy movie starring the great Vincent Price, who was in dozens of classic horror films from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. He was in the 1935's House of Wax, which was the first 3D movie. He also narrated the Michael Jackson Thriller video. Now, The Tingler is about a centipede creature that grows inside a person who gets scared. It continues to grow, and the only way to stop it is to scream in fear. It was directed by William Castle, who also directed horror classics like House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts. My favorite scene is when the centipede grows in this woman who is both deaf and mute, so she can't scream to kill the creature. Her husband puts on a scary mask and scares her to death. Then Price, who plays a medical doctor, removes the creature to examine it. Number 9. High Tension, a French slasher film starring Cécile de France, directed by Alexandre Aja, who also wrote the Hills Have Eyes remake, which I loved, and the Maniac remake. Now, just like the title says, this film has lots of high tension and is full of suspenseful moments. Two girlfriends go on a road trip and are stalked by a sadistic truck driver. The kills are gory, graphic, and intense. You're either going to like the twist ending or hate it, but you won't see it coming. My favorite scene is when Cecile's girlfriend is kidnapped by the killer and she has to go save her. There is a suspenseful cat and mouse game before she finally goes toe to toe with the killer. Number 8, Suspiria, an Italian horror film starring Jessica Harper and directed by Dario Argento. Now, it's about a ballerina dancer who arrives at a dance school and someone is killing off the dancers. It also involves witches doing black magic. Now, this is one of the most visually stunning films I've ever seen. Every shot is like a mosaic framed piece of art, a vibrant kaleidoscope of colors, and the death scenes are poetically beautiful. And the music is both creepy and enchanting. I really love this movie. My favorite scene is when one of the dancers gets lost inside a colorful maze of hallways and ends up trapped in a certain room filled with something horrifying before she meets her demise. Also, pay attention to the unsettling music. Number 7, Let the Right One In, a Swedish vampire film directed by Tomas Alfredson. Now, this is the most realistic take on vampires I've ever seen. It's no Twilight crap. A young girl vampire makes friends with an awkward little boy who gets bullied a lot. She has an older caretaker who goes out and kills for her every night so she can feed. My favorite scene is when the vampire girl visits the boy at home and he wants to find out what happens if she just walks through the threshold without inviting her inside. What happens is clever and shocking the first time you see it. Number 6, The Omen, starring one of my favorite actors, Gregory Peck, and directed by Richard Donner, who directed Superman 1 and 2 and Lethal Weapon. Now, I'm instantly creeped out with anything to do with demonic and religious curses. Peck and his wife adopt a little boy who just happens to be the devil's son. Then all these horrific freak accidents happen to anyone who gets too close to finding out what the boy is. The ending is not your typical hero resolution. Also want to point out that this movie won an Oscar for Best Score. My favorite scene is when his friend gets an omen that he's going to die, and then he gets decapitated by a large plate of glass. Number 5, An American Werewolf in London, starring David Newton and Jenny Agutter, who is also in Child's Play 2, and it's directed by John Landis. Now, this film is a perfect mix of gore and comedy. Two friends go backpacking through Scotland, and one of them gets bitten by a werewolf. Then every full moon he turns into a werewolf and goes around the streets of London killing people. And the only way to break the curse is to kill himself. Now, Rick Baker won an Oscar for Best Makeup for this film. My favorite scene is when he first turns into a werewolf. Now, he's sitting in a recliner reading a book, listening to Creedence Clearwater Revival's Bad Moon Rising. Then all of a sudden, he jumps out of the recliner screaming in pain and agony, and that's when he turns into the werewolf. Number 4, Child's Play, starring Brad Dourif, who does the iconic voice of Chucky, and Catherine Hicks, who's most known for the series Seventh Heaven. It's written by Don Mancini, who wrote all of the Child's Play films, including the last one, The Curse of Chucky, which I liked a lot. Now, dolls in general creep me out, but Chucky always scared me. Now, he's a killer who uses black magic to transfer his soul into a toy Chucky doll to take revenge on the detective who killed him. My favorite scene is when the mother finds the batteries that were never put inside the doll, but it was still talking to her. That's when Chucky first comes alive, and she freaks out and he bites her. Number 3, The Thing, starring Kurt Russell and directed by John Carpenter. Now, it's the only remake on the list of the 1959 black and white classic sci-fi film, The Thing from Another Planet, which I liked. John Campbell wrote the original 1938 sci-fi novel from which the 59 remake was based on. Now, it's about a group of people stationed in Antarctica. They come across an alien life form that can turn and imitate into any person it comes in contact with. They start turning on each other because they don't know which one is the alien. Also, Tom Savini did the practical makeup effects, which were great. My favorite scene is the blood sample test to find out which one of them is posing as the alien. The alien reveals itself and attacks them, and then they burn it with a flamethrower. It was fun seeing it for the first time. Number 2, Halloween, also directed by John Carpenter. The original title of this movie was The Babysitter Murders, and Michael Myers was called The Shape. Now, it's starring Jamie Lee Curtis and the great Donald Pleasant, who was so dedicated playing the role of the iconic Dr. Loomis. Now, what I love about this film is the atmosphere. It feels like the Halloween season. The beautiful lighting and the cast shadow sets the creepy tone. Now, the budget was $325,000 and it made $70 million. That's amazing. Now, I couldn't decide between when Michael Myers sits up and the iconic music starts playing, or when Myers jumps out from behind the sofa and Laurie stabs him. Then she checks behind the sofa and he's gone. Before I reveal my number 1 favorite horror film, here are some horrifying mentions. You have Evil Dead, which was both disturbing and funny. Alien. Black Christmas, which was directed by Bob Clark, who gave John Carpenter the idea for the Halloween movie. Wrong Turn. 2001's A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Alice, Sweet Alice. Silence of the Lambs, who won an Oscar for Best Screenplay. The Original Maniac, starring Joe Spinell, which he owned that role. The Shining, also directed by Stanley Kubrick. And They Live. Number 1, The Exorcist, starring Linda Blair, which I have met many years ago, and I have her autograph. Directed by William Friedkin, who also directed The French Connection and Cruising, and it was based off the novel written by William Peter Blatty. Now, this film holds a close place in my heart. As a kid, I talked a big game about not being afraid to watch this film for the first time, but when I did, I was too terrified to even finish it. I had nightmares about her ugly possessed face for months after that, until I got enough courage to watch it again with a group of my friends, and I did make it all the way to the end. That's when I started hating anything to do with curses or demonic religious films. Now, this movie won an Oscar for the first Best Picture ever, any horror movie to win. And the budget was $12 million, and it made $444 million. This is truly my favorite horror film of all time. My favorite scene is when Regan meets Father Karras. She's tied to the bed, and Father Karras asks her, well, if you're a demon, why can't you just break the straps and free yourself? Then with a deep demonic voice, she replies, in time. So those are my top 10 favorite horror films and scenes ever, just in time for Halloween. Let me know in the comments below if you like or hate the movies on my list. Also, which movies you haven't seen yet and would like to see.